Overlords. Yesterday evening, I was sitting in a church classroom listening to a Bible study, my gaze intermittently wandering between our pastor and the arched window that opened to the parking lot. As I watched my car saturating in the summer rains after drizzle, two large figures suddenly crowded the window's scope. Specifically, I saw two 10-foot-tall alien overlords casually walking together, conversing and apparently on their way inside. One was shiny ebony and the other lustrous walnut. Their comparatively small wings dangled behind them almost as afterthoughts. Their thin faces looked out through huge dark mirrored eyes, gracefully aligned between curved horns. One spoke as the other looked ahead and nodded, and then they were gone. Could it be? I thought. I quietly excused myself to Frank and Brenda sitting on either side of me and bounded for the door. Just in time, as the overlords approached the church entrance, I stopped in front of them and blurted out, "Hi, I'm a fan." They looked at me, puzzled. Then I remembered that in the book I just read, they'd come to Earth with impressive yet non-idiomatic English. I realized that if they measure sanity as we do, they probably thought me a bit outside of it. The brown one looked at me inquiringly, the black one glanced at his friend, then at me. I tried to smile as sanely as possible. I just read your book, and I think you guys are great. But remember how you knew people would be afraid of you at first? So you were these wonderful, unseen, ethical overlords for years before you let yourselves be seen? Don't you think you might unsettle your public a little bit this time by appearing just as you are, right off? They stood still, bending their tall figures over me, staring down in unison, their huge eyes watering in the earth's excessive sunlight. I have to say, even for fans like me, they were extremely intimidating in person. "You mean we're famous?" asked the black one, breaking into a boyish smile, his delicate eyes crinkling up into gray pockets at their corners, his curved black teeth glinting in the sun. The brown one peered down with similar enthusiasm, and, although I'm sure they weren't aware of it, the effect was nearly overwhelming. "But I don't remember being an overlord," mused the brown one, Arthur, unassumingly, looking at his black companion, Clarke, who shrugged in light-hearted accordance. "Oh, well, in the book you were, and you were so good at it that once people got used to you, they even preferred you to their old human governments. I'd vote for you." Arthur's thin coffee lips curled into a grin, and he looked as if he would speak, but then didn't. Instead, he turned intently toward an unseen animal rustling in the bushes. "So," I said, wanting to extend our interview longer, but not sure how to go about it, "would you like to get something to eat?" Arthur glanced at his companion. Clarke tilted his head awkwardly. "You do eat, right?" I asked. Arthur looked as if he were again about to say something, but Clarke nudged him, and then he seemed to think better of it. "No," he answered instead. Clarke stared at the ground. "No," repeated Clarke. "And, I'm sorry, but we're not actually overlords in real life, despite any physical resemblance. We just seem to have taken a wrong turn and are trying to get back to the galaxy way." Arthur added, "We're specimen collectors for the government." Clarke smiled at me, concurring amiably. "Oh," I nodded. "Where's your ship?" Arthur pointed to a large depressed spot in the foliage directly adjacent to the parking lot. "We weren't sure if we were legal to park here," he explained. "Oh, good thinking. You never know," I affirmed. "So, if you don't mind my asking, where are you headed?" "Well, we were headed home with our weekly quota of collections," Clarke began. "But then we were running out of fuel, so we did an emergency stop at the nearest exit. Earth is a bit obscure, but it's very convenient access to the galaxy way." "Oh, good to know," I replied. "So, what do you use for fuel?" "Cats," replied Arthur, surveying a shrub. Clarke shot him a hard look. Grass." "Sorry," Arthur corrected, grinning at me solicitously. Clarke winced. I hesitated, weighing the value of inquiring further. And as I collected my thoughts, a compact, human-sized robot carrying an electronic tablet wheeled out from the invisible ship, first appearing to hover above the squashed weeds, then rolling down onto the asphalt. Says they can't live very long without stomachs, so I don't think that's a good option. Clarke and Arthur both hurled looks at their crewmate. The robot with his square metallic features looked blankly at me, then innocently around him, as improvisationally as a robot can. Never mind, he resolved, picking up a gray rock off the ground and holding it up. Ah, this one's good. And he quickly wheeled around and back up the invisible plank. And I, momentarily, thought I heard cats mewing. Arthur grinned hospitably while stealing glances toward animal sounds he heard in the nearby bushes. Clarke sighed impatiently, as tempted as I was to cling to the image of the two gentlemen overlords I admired from my book. I couldn't help now feeling a bit dubious of the connection. It didn't help that Clarke kept staring at my torso. I'd catch him, his eyes would immediately wander away. Then, a moment later, they'd ricochet back again, almost assessing? For the second time, I took a step back, until everyone's concentration was broken by a mortified-looking Frank, who'd come out from the building. He stood stone still before Clarke, Arthur, and me, his paling lips locked. Then he finally sputtered out, "You forgot this," and he stiffly held out my waist pack. Clarke ogled his stomach. "Oh, thank you. I was so excited I forgot it," I explained. But to Frank, who'd apparently had not read the book about the wise, kindly overlords, it explained nothing. Frank volunteers doing church security on Sundays, and I think his brave appearance now was the ultimate extension of that. I was impressed and was sorry to have unwittingly dragged him into this. I looked at him with concern. He stood immovable, but looked like he might involuntarily hit the pavement at any minute. And then there was a sudden wind, followed by the sound of a sucking crystalline pop. A surging cloud of ultra-condensed water vapor and dust particles plunked and writhed at our feet. Frank and I wondered at it, its acidic pungence wafting. Arthur turned to Clarke as if to say, "Not again." Clarke rolled his eyes and grumbled loudly. Then, to my shock and to Frank's unspeakable relief, they turned and bolted inside the ship, 4 distressed cats streaking out past them as they disappeared into the doorway's void. Immediately, nearly as we saw the heel of the last huge dark foot absorbed into nothing, we heard a sizzling panel of rippling booms overhead. Pressure changes exceeding the speed of sound tore throbbing acoustics into the atmosphere, casting aftergusts on Frank and me below. An urgent grinding force swooped past, its sonic impact rattling through us. Then there was an eerie chirp, a sharp tear, and one final gust shoving us backward. Finally, complete silence. We watched the atmospheric cloud on the ground dissipate into swirling wisps, and we were almost remorseful for the last visible proof of what we'd seen to dissolve and invite ambiguity instead. After a moment, Frank muttered something about needing prayer, then wandered back inside the church. I probably did too, but was too wound up at the moment to concentrate on anything else. So I just drove home. That night, as doubt over what was no longer seen grew, I fired up my Kindle and revisited my Overlords book, irrationally hoping for some kind of assurance. Glancing over the table of contents, I was surprised to notice a final chapter that I didn't remember having read before, although I was sure that I'd finished the book. It read, "In the Middle Years, opportunistic units attempted contact with Earth people, exploiting their same species resemblance to quickly gain the trust of naive readers. Their unauthorized contact proved destructive to our galactic reputation, as it was parasitic in aim. As a result, a focused police unit was formed to track, intercept, and prosecute offenders." How did the criminals know whom to target? Well, the chapter's footnotes got on to explain that. Here, the conspiracy theorists might have one right. It turns out that advanced alien races do have access to our internet, cataloging every Google search and Amazon purchase. including Kindle ones. Turns out the more honorable species use it for biological and ethnographic research, as the basis for government reports and academic coursework and so forth. But ill-intentioned ones use it to eat us and take over our planet. Figuring I should share this with Frank, I emailed him, encouraging him to read the book and pasting a copy of the final chapter into the body of the message. Next Sunday at church, I approached him to see how he was doing. He appeared a shade more solemn than normal, but not nearly as bad off as I'd feared, so I asked, "You seem to be doing okay. Did reading that chapter help?" "Some," Frank replied. My pride slightly checked. I continued looking at him inquiringly. He explained. "After everyone left that evening, I stayed behind and looked for the cats we saw escape. I keep a pouch of tuna in my car for emergencies, so it wasn't hard. When they came to me, I opened up Google Translate on my phone and set it to cat." "There's cat? Is that a premium feature?" "No, but it's new. You'd be surprised at all the things they're coming out with nowadays." "Yeah. So what did they say?" "Well, they were reticent at first, because they said the last individual to offer them food locked them in a cage, then mused openly about how many more of them he would need for fuel to get home. But once I pointed out that I was a totally different species and that I was afraid of the aliens too, they began to trust me. Cats said they talked a lot about escape plans, should their alien authorities come after them. The orange one thought they'd need at least 11 more cats to get to their nearest escape planet, Blinkvir, 180 million miles away. Turns out they actually were low on fuel, so he calculates that without more cats, they couldn't even get to Mars. In other words, they'd most likely have been apprehended by now. Makes me feel better, I guess. I smiled back at him, also relieved, yet a little unnerved on a different count. "Have cats always understood us?" I asked. "That's what I said," replied Frank. "They said yes, so long as we ever had something worth listening to." I always knew they were haughty. I wrapped my head around that for a moment, then asked, "Did they mention what would happen to the aliens if they were arrested?" "Yes, actually. 260 million miles away, on their home planet of Sidevlast, Clarke's glossy skin echoed the sheen of 3 diamond suns. Arthur quickly handed him a hook to unlatch the Durnix enclosure while he stood ready to take hold of the first one's left horn and try to coax him to ingest his daily nutritional pellets. 5 years rehabilitative community service, with time off for good behavior, was Sidevlast's sentence for violating interplanetary contact and predation laws. As its progressive court also frowned on animal cruelty, it determined that shepherding the massive, high-needs Durnix would best train compassion and humility into its pupils. "Okay, got him," said Arthur, with a note of accomplishment. And, as restraints weren't permitted in the care of Durnix, some days it took up to half an hour simply to gain hold of one uninterested animal. Flaring his leathery wings, Arthur then propelled himself upward and sat atop Molebrip, the dusty, slow-moving intellect of the herd, his rough, tawny cords swaying from his barrel back. As Molebrip, almost uniquely among the herd, grasped the connection between an open pen and food, he was always first and most eager out of the pen each day. Clarke and Arthur knew to anticipate greater challenges as their hot afternoon progressed. 72 years back through the corridors of time, the author sat at his typewriter, gazing out the window of his London bedsit. His mind reeled from the seminal conversation he'd had the evening before with 2 large, dark, winged aliens, emergency landed in a nearby park's brush. As he was dazzled by their superhuman knowledge and integrity, and was generally given to political skepticism, he mused that they'd make excellent global leaders, and thus the plot was born. Vinegrad and Jandal, the original alien pair, also remembered the meeting well, but with mixed feelings. Their landing truly was accidental, as was their encountering the young writer that day. Having known about his impressionable, wide-eyed race's passion for power and for false messiahs, they regretted having engaged with him, and, although The young man's book was an enduring tribute. They felt, particularly in light of recent arrests, it may have done humans more harm than good. Weingrad looked out of his octagonal aperture window, its animatronic lids fluttering adjustment to the sun's changing intensities. A flock of long-necked parrella touched down on the exposed sandbank below, then relaunched over the water, their white underwings humming quiet melodies, while their flapping metronomic outerwings beat time. He forgave his scheming countrymen. He knew that the outcome for all events are, at least eventually, multifaceted, and that some good would stem from their crime, just as it had from his and Jandal's blunder years ago. His modest cult celebrity on Earth held little interest for him, but it did, he felt, obligate him to some responsibility. And so he opened his writing tablet and began an addendum, the first of several, it would turn out, to correct and downplay any epilogic events, and to encourage his fan base to direct their stargazing toward a healthier object of wonder.